Hey, I'm Matt Peeples, founder and director of the Kairos Network, and I was also a church planter in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I remember when we were planting out our church, I had trained for 6 months at a church in Hot Springs, Arkansas, Lake Point Church. And I remember when we were going into Knoxville that my mentor and I had decided we've got to launch this church out on Easter Sunday, because Easter Sunday is the perfect time to launch a church. If you're going to launch a church, you launch it at the New Year or Easter Sunday. And so I hit ground in January 2010, fully intent on planting that Easter. 4 months later, I had a timeline, a strategy, and I was ready to go. And as we got closer and closer to Easter, it became evident to everybody else except for me that we probably should not launch until finally I had a heart-to-heart with our mother church who said, look, we're not launching on Easter. Take some more time. Use Easter Sunday to cast the vision for your church. And I'll always remember sitting down as we got closer and closer to Easter. I only had 2 people in my launch team committed at that time, 2 or 3. And I remember just the sheer dread on their faces as we were getting closer and closer to Easter. And they're like, we're going to launch a church. We're not ready. We're not ready. And so what I learned in that was a really important lesson, because later, after that Easter, we ended up holding off till later that August, and we launched out our church on August 21st, 2010. And when we launched the church, we had a great launch. We were able to move forward well into that first year, and the church is still here today. And one of the reasons is I learned a really important lesson. See, when you're launching a church, there are 2 things you want to keep in mind. You want to keep in mind time, and you also want to keep in mind momentum. Time and momentum. And it's kind of this 2-part thing that you need to have working together in order to be able to launch something out. You need time, in essence, to keep you accountable. So if you don't have any time and you're just waiting for that right momentum, you may never see any traction moving forward because you don't really have anything that's forcing you to kind of wake up in the morning and get the ball kind of rolling. You'll kind of just never stop if you're just kind of waiting for momentum to happen. On the flip end, if you're only allowing time to dictate a launch, then you're essentially saying it doesn't matter how many people we have gathered together or how ready we might be. The time says we're supposed to launch, so we're going to launch. The reality is, whenever you're launching anything, whether it's a ministry, a business, you have 2 things that you've got to keep in tension: time and momentum. So since we talk about church planting, what I want to talk to you about is just keeping those 2 things in tension. So what you want to do is develop your timeline. When you sit down, really think through what's the timeline we want to shoot for. And as you build that timeline out, create a few momentum markers along the side of those things. So for example, if you're trying to launch out a church and you've got a certain model that you're launching in, you may decide that you need X number of people gathered together in your core before you can really start launching out. Well, if you hit the time that you're supposed to launch out and you don't have that many people in your core, then I would say it's time to kind of adjust your timeline a little bit. Make sure you're still tracking the right direction. Maybe you've got so many people gathered together that you're starting to realize, hey, we can launch way earlier than we thought. Then allow the momentum to dictate the time. See, what you want to do is you want to not just have simply a time marker or simply a momentum marker, but you want to hold those 2 things in balance. And if you do that, that'll be a great way to help sure that you're making sure that you're managing the momentum as you move forward. So remember, don't just look at time, don't just look at momentum. Always look at time and momentum and how they work together.